All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Monday, October 7th, and a pretty choppy day overall. First things first, just a risk disclaimer for today's video. Of course, like usual, everything we're going over is for information purposes only, not giving out any recommendations or advice, and there's the disclaimer for you. But yeah, I mean, you could see, so a couple things, right? This video will be a little bit shorter than normal because there just really wasn't a lot going on today, and plus I'm a little bit under the weather, so I've been traveling a lot over the last couple weekends, so I think it finally caught up to me a bit. But looking at the pure numbers here of what the averages did after the open. SPY Q's basically flat. They've tried to rally a little bit. Couldn't get going. Of course, was a couple trade type headlines, right, on the trade meeting that's going to happen later in the week on Thursday, and I think that's kind of just where we are right now. I think we're, I think the market is kind of waiting for what that is going to mean at the end of the week, right? We don't know if they're going to kind of meet and get something done. Um, there was some initial thoughts, I guess, from the China side that they are not really going to budge on some of those major issues like IP and so forth, or the intellectual property rights, as well as some of the other bigger issues that I think the U.S. wants. They are willing to budge on things like buying agriculture products. So I think that's what it's going to come down. My guess, I don't know. I'm not in that. Won't be in that room. But it really depends if one side is going to bend or not. Because I have been saying for a while that I don't think that you get one of these major deals, but maybe they want to do something for like just saving grace. I don't know. It's going to be interesting how it ends. So, like anything, like any game, right? You have to have a little bit of a strategy plan for what you're thinking. How this is going to work. If you think this is going to end badly, very easy to buy some S&P puts right now. Because again, we saw these two flurries of headlines today, and I think it kind of gets traders to kind of scramble around. I didn't do anything because I'm like, hey, this is how I'm going to position for this week, and it's not really going to change that much. If I want to make some tweaks, I was talking about there's one trade that I suggested in the trading room today where you can sell premium. And I'm going to go over the charts in just a second and why I think that might be a decent idea. But you could also, make sure that you've got insurance. But, in my opinion, trying to do that once you see the headline is kind of, you're going to miss the majority of the price action. So you just kind of have to be prepared and think things through a couple moves ahead, like a game of chess, and just be kind of prepared for it because there's going to be something that happens. Either A, they're going to actually get something done. B, they're going to leave and say, hey, we're going to continue to work on it. Or C, they're going to get frustrated with one another and there could be more tariffs that happens right away if they depart in a bad way. But those are the things that you want to think about. And I don't think that you want to be thinking about those on Thursday. And if you're not sure about all those, and if you don't have a good view, because listen, nobody's going to be in that room, as traders, you basically can just position lighter than normal, which is kind of what I'm thinking, right? I've got a couple trades on, but I'm not really looking to take a lot of risk, which kind of brings us to this morning, which is what I said in the pre-market session. Also, kind of if you look at where the S&P is here, so I'm sorry, let me go back to I'll come back to the performance, but you could see that the major indices, there really wasn't much. The VIX went down a little bit. Gold and silver really nowhere to be found today. Also, bonds were weak as well. So, we've seen a couple days where a couple things have worked. Both bonds and equities have gone up. Well, today they both went down because SPY was down 40 basis points and TLT was also down as well. Right, so these things happen. Again, what I try to tell people when they look at this relationship, it's not a relationship that holds every single day. Over time, there is a little bit of a negative correlation between bonds and stock, but it's not -1, number one, And it doesn't hold every single day. You're going to get days where everything goes up, some days everything goes down. All right, so why I kind of thought to kind of that we would get a choppy day today is because if you look at the 1 hour value area, which has really been giving us all the clues that we need. um, Let me just get rid of market breadth, which you could see was negative for the day. I don't need that in here. So where we started the day like right at the top of value. That's not the best setup, I think. Right? Just like we kind of start, just like we've talked about for the last couple of weeks. When we approach this top of value, you want to wait for a little bit of confirmation. Now we tried to kind of get back above it, and we just ran out of steam very quickly. The other thing that we pointed out this morning, and I will show you so that you don't know if you think I'm making this up. But I said, hey, watch this. This is where we were this morning when I sent the morning note out. But I said, also, we've got resistance up here, right? Which we didn't even get there. But 2962, remember that level, 2962. That's going to come upon, if we look at the daily chart, it's basically 2965, which is 3 handles up. But you've got decent overhead resistance here. So you're going to need something to kind of get us through. I don't think it's just going to magically float above if there's some type of trade war progress. If not, we're going to explore back in this range again. And we'll go back to this 1 hour. And you could see we are in value. So I would be a little bit more conservative here. I don't think the risk to reward setup is great here. Unless we kind of manage to get back into this frame, which is where we were in the beginning of the week, by the way, of last week. So that's that. And again, this kind of really just framing risk to reward. How good is the setup for this week versus how bad is the setup for this week? So that's kind of how I look things, and that helps me. And I did very little here. I'll show you the trading that I did today. It was basically nothing. Right? Kind of just light. I got out of some SPY calls today that I was long from last week. I took a target on Bristol Myers. I put on a little bit of an AMD December call trade, and I was looking at Paycom today and put on a small credit spread for that. But again, very light trading. So if you think that this overhead resistance is going to come into play, what we talked about was also selling a call spread that expires this week, out of the money call spread. And I did that right in here today. Talked about that once we got above value, because I figured, hey, there's a little bit of strength today. You could actually sell, you could collect some premium if you think we're going to stall with that overhead resistance, which is what we talked about this morning, those technical levels. So again, thinking things through in the morning, before the day starts, can really help you not overtrade when there's not a lot of opportunities around. Again, that's why we do it every morning, to get people ready for that. All right, so what did perform well today? Let me go back to my spreadsheet. There were a couple sectors that bucked the trend. The transports still finished down on the day, but they were your biggest mover from open to close, and and again, a day that we basically went nowhere over the session. Also, a little bit of strength out of the software names, and it was select software. It wasn't the whole group, because you could see the whole group, IGV, which I'm not really convinced at this chart yet that it's fully recovering. It's got to get over the 50-day moving average. This could be a false breakdown. Kind of talked about that in this weekend's member video. But I think if you look at some of the names within the group, right? So one that I was looking at today was Paycom Software. It has to recover that 20-day moving average, but I like how it's showing some signs of life here. So again, still has to get through overhead resistance, 221. If you're a really good scalper, you could maybe look for that level. But if we look at some other names within the group, somebody was just asking me about a couple of these names. So for example, AYX. So what do you do with these names, right? The software names have really. So I'll spend a couple minutes here because, like I said, there's not much to really talk about other than things that you're going to hear over and over in the media about. We've got trade talks later in the week. So let's concentrate on some setups. So first of all, we did see some call activity in this group today, specifically, and Slack. And this isn't easy. Like this is kind of where my analysis is going to be. Even though this is a newer name, it's trying to take back those short-term moving averages. So you could basically just use, rather than personal judgment. And again, you kind of have to like the name to begin with. But if you like the name, it retook the 5 period moving average and the 20 period. So very easy. Try to keep it as simple as possible. If you like this name, which again saw that momentum call buying today, you could basically set your stop to the 20-day moving average because we are in. It's the first value area that I actually have on my chart. So very easy trade. Set your stop to just below the 20-day moving average and see what it wants to do. And you could do that as similar. So if we look at AY, let's put the wrong symbol in. AYX is another one. Just took back the 20-day moving average today. So, all of these names, this was, a beautiful trend that got smacked over the head. You do have resistance up here of 121. That's where you could look to maybe take the trade off or at least take a big target, and use that 20-day moving average or use the open of today. Same thing if we look at maybe workday. I actually like this setup here because you got just a lot of consolidation that we're finally getting above, and you can use 176, right? It's all about being disciplined because even if you really like the name, it may not work out. So you have to know where it's not going to work out. So if it's kind of showing a false recovery, I would basically maybe even give it a little bit more tolerance and maybe say 173 could be your stop if you're looking to enter it for today. A couple other ones that someone mentioned to me, just so we could kind of go through this. MDB, which I always thought was a tough name to trade, but you could basically use that 50-day moving average, right? Maybe give it one more day, see if it can get above that 50-day moving average. That's the purple line that coincides with the top of value. That's how I would wait for it, and I know you're not getting it at bargain prices. At this point, maybe see how it handles that top of value. TTD is another one, probably one of the easier setups. Just use that bottom of value. I know you have that 200-day moving average coming into play, but basically use 187.66 and see where this the trade desk wants to go if it can recoup. But I actually like this one as one of the better setups. But that's how you basically just have to go through. You need something to say, for something that's had a pretty steep decline. Was a high of 289, now down to 194. That's an easy way to kind of look at things. Team is another one. This one I don't like right here because you got to get through, some resistance. I either like playing this once it recoups value to go all the way through, or basically looking for a break higher. But I'll tell you, this group has done pretty well. Coupa Software still is, I think, the best one out of the group, and has had that relative strength. Really, as far as it went down, took out this Virgin point of control. Octa's also behaved pretty well. Has now had 3 or 4 days, and has approached that 50-day moving average. So at this point, maybe it comes in, it back tests 111.50. That would be a great place. So if you kind of missed the move in Octa and you've been looking at it and you want to get involved, I would say if this thing checks back to that top of value, that would be a good place to get involved. What else? A couple other names that we saw option activity in. I mentioned Work, also Biogen. Kind of an interesting. I didn't see where this one closed, but just they just bought weeklies, so you could have played this for a day trade. Again, my rule with option activity, it can give you a trade idea. Something that maybe wasn't on your radar. You go to the chart, check it out. If it meets your system, but that's how I use them. As well. Sometimes if it's a very short-term trade, it could see a little bit of that short-term momentum. But you have to be very careful with names you see option activity in, because as we know, um, many of them don't work out. Doesn't matter how aggressive they buy them. All right. So what else for the day? I think that's where we'll leave it. The video is about 15 minutes long. So I think that's the thing that we just kind of have to think about, is what we've got for the rest of the week, and maybe being not exposed too much, with that scenario that I described here earlier with the trade talks, but maybe having a couple trades on, and depending on what your view is, just so that you have some exposure. And that's the beauty of option trading, is that you can have some out of the money, puts or calls on, and if a big move does happen, the options will be able to take advantage of that. All right, guys, so we'll leave it there. Have a great night, and see you tomorrow.